In this video, let us try to understand what is single responsibility principle. So what does this principle means? Each software module should have one and only reason to change. Robert C. Martin, who is popularly called as Uncle Bob, is credited for the single responsibility principle. To listen, it is very simple statement, right? But wait, don't you get a question in your mind? What is a module in the context of our Python language? So just remember here, a module refers to a class or even a single function or method. Okay, now we understood that point, but don't you get another doubt? What is the meaning for one and only reason to change? Now, let us try to understand in detail. We know that the individual classes and methods in our applications defines what and how the application does. We can often improvise the design of our software if we are able to separate the what from the how, and to achieve that we can use encapsulation. Classes should be encapsulated to perform a single task in a particular way so that it will be easy to use and also easy for testability. Whenever the classes performs too many things, they are often end up in lot of tightly coupling the things, which makes the overall class much harder to use and causes problems. And always remember that a general purpose tool can always add additional complexity. For example, if there is a problem with one part of the multi-purpose tool, then it can impact all the other parts of the tool also, right? Now, let us try to understand a requirement and let us solve that requirement using single responsibility principle. Let us assume that we have a requirement stating that we need an user registration module where the user data should be stored within the SQLite database. And if there is an error, we need to log that error. And also, once the user has been registered, we would like to send an email to the registered user. Now, in a normal way, if a person who doesn't follow the rules or principles in writing the code can easily imagine to create a class with a name called as user registration, and we need to perform three different tasks. One is to register the user, the second one is to log if there is an error, and finally the third task will be to send an email to the user registered. So within the class user registration, they will try to create three different methods such as register user, which will accept the username and password and the email ID. Then a method to perform the log operation, which accepts the error. And finally a method like send email, which might accept the email ID and also the content to be sent, right? Now, a quick question. If we write the class definition in this way, will it work or not? And how many of you feel that this will not work? If anyone think that this will not work means it is totally wrong. This class works perfectly. But only problem is this is violating the single responsibility principle. Our class user registration is taking the responsibility to perform three different tasks which should be avoided. Then what is the solution for this means we can create a class called as user registration with a method to add the record to SQLite database. Then we might need to define the second class, for example logger, which will perform the log operation. And for the third task, we might need to create one more class, for example, email, to send an email to the specified email ID with the content. So instead of writing everything in one single fat class, we will be separating them into multiple small classes where each class will be responsible for performing a single task. Usually, we might get a doubt now. If everything is written in one single class, it is quite easy for us to write the code, and some of our friends might even think that the maintenance will be easy, right? If everything is in one class. And many people violate single responsibility principle as they don't know about the issue because of the so-called what happens behavior. Whenever there is a new requirement, they have to go and modify the existing code in their projects. And this is quite normal to most of the developers. And also, they say we don't face any problems. But the fact that they are modifying existing one and leading to regression testing and bugs itself is a big problem. You need to always remember one important point while working with the object oriented programming principles. It is all about the requirements. If the requirement changes, the way we need to handle the task will also change. So, it is always a good practice to put more questions to the client and understand the requirement properly. For example, we may have a task to log the error message to the system event log, right? For example, we have a task to log the error message to the system event log, right? Now then we need to make sure from the client, will they need to maintain the log only to the system event log, or will they be extending the requirement to maintain the log within the file or database, etc. If they say that the requirement is only to maintain the log in system event log, then we can proceed in this way. Else, we need to follow a different design principle like OCP along with the SRP. What is OCP? We shall understand after completing SRP. Now, let us try to understand what are the advantages we will get when we are developing our application using single responsibility principle. The first one is maintainability. Usually, if our application is being used over longer period of time, then it might happen that the original team who had written the code might not be available and a new team might be managing the existing code. And if the applications has followed single responsibility principle, it will be very easy to manage the code. The next advantage we will be having is testability. Whenever we are developing a larger application, then test driven application development will be usually done. And if the application is following single responsibility principle, then it will be quite easy for testing. The major advantage of single responsibility principle will be its flexibility in extending the application. Usually, whenever we develop an application, remember that for sure it won't remain the same for a longer period of time. The applications usually will be enhanced with the new requirements and modifications. So developing the application using SRP will be very helpful in that scenarios. And the next major advantage we will be having is the support for parallel development and loose coupling. Now, let us try to understand some of the rules that we need to follow while working with single responsibility principle. Each class and module should focus on a single task at a time, and everything in the class should be related to the single purpose only. Then usually we get a question, can we have multiple members within a class? Means yes, we can have any number of members within the class, but we need to remember that all the members present within the class should be responsible for performing a single activity. Now, let us try to understand the single responsibility principle practically with the demo.